Well, a good Sunday afternoon to you. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist John Dawson. This is Beryl. It is a major hurricane, Category 4 in size and strength, and it is headed to the Caribbean. It's going to be the main focus at what we talk about. But a quick reminder, if you are thinking about preparations for this year, and I hope that you are, because you never know where these things are going to end up, I want to make sure that you have looked at my YouTube channel. So again, Fox 26 meteorologist John Dawson, but the best way to find me on YouTube is just search meteorologist John Dawson. Now be careful though, don't be looking up too much of that stuff that's over 6 years old or anything. Keep with the current things that are out there. There's a playlist for you. Again, if you're on YouTube, search meteorologist John Dawson. That's the best way to find my channel. Lots of preparation items with my hurricane gear test. That's going to be a fantastic way to kind of just get your mind thinking about preparations. Not necessarily has to be the specific items that I'm looking at, but again, it kind of gets you kind of through that process of, oh, how this applies to me and things like that. Here's Beryl, and Beryl is going to be a major concern for most of the Caribbean right now. And if you're in the Gulf Coast, particularly Texas, Louisiana, it's something that we're watching. We're not overly excited at this point because most indications are that it will be staying to our south, but we are going to be making sure that this thing is going to do what it's expected to do. Let me put it that way for sure. Here's all the 4 p.m. stats here, going through it real quick. The movement is at about 18 miles an hour to the west-northwest, so moving fairly quickly. That pressure 960, and then those max winds at 130 miles an hour right now. And I've mentioned this is the 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon update, as we expect this system to stay at least Category 4 in strength as it officially passes the Windward Islands and into the Caribbean. And then it becomes a little less favorable overall conditions once it gets into the central Caribbean and then moreover even to the west. It's going to be interacting with a little bit of wind shear. Now, how much wind shear and how much that's going to impact it, it's not crystal clear on that point, but it does look like at least maybe we can get this thing to slow down a little bit from its growth and continue to maybe even weaken a little bit. And that's the current plan from the National Hurricane Center. When we get to Tuesday, it looks like these winds will drop down back to a Category 3. That's still a major hurricane, and then possibly even weaken a little bit more as it gets closer into Jamaica. So right now, the Hurricane Center has that at a Cat 2 as it brushes just to the south of Jamaica. And again, remember our forecast cone, I've got a line here in the middle representing where it thinks where the forecast has the center of that circulation. This is not an impact cone. This is really anywhere that center of circulation could end up. So it could certainly cross right over the top of Jamaica. The impacts will be much wider than what this cone is showing right now. And then we continue to take this out even a little bit further, and this ends up impacting the Yucatan Peninsula. And that's when we get into Thursday and into Friday. And then, of course, you know, when you're this far out, there's obviously low confidence, more questions than anything else about where this system would be heading. At the moment, though, it does look like it would continue to stay headed sort of south and into Mexico. I've got the futurecast here that we're going to look at in just a moment, and you'll see that. But this is, again, kind of what we are looking for at the moment. So there's quite a bit of sort of history that comes along with this storm. The earliest major hurricanes to form. So Beryl is going to be considered up in there with one of them. It happened in June 30th. In June 8th, Alma, that's back in 1966, formed, and Hurricane Dennis on July 8th of 2025 is the earliest Category 4 on record. So now that we see Beryl at that Category 4 strength, we will be classifying that one as the earliest occurring, the earliest Category 4 hurricane in June instead of in July is kind of what we've got happening with Beryl. I showed you some of these steering currents yesterday. Nothing major has changed, and this is one of the reasons why Beryl is expected to stay fairly low in the latitudes. In other words, staying into the Caribbean and not curving up and into the Atlantic like sometimes we would see systems do. And that these high pressure ridges kind of keeps that steering current where it's not allowing it to move up in latitudes, move to the north, in other words. Typically, a hurricane is going to take the path of least resistance. It's not going to try to barrel through, no pun intended there with the name. Beryl's not going to try to boss its way through these high pressure ridges. So let's watch the Futurecast. This is the exclusive Fox model. If you're not watching any other of the Fox entities, you won't be seeing this model because this one is ours. We are the folks in Orlando are responsible for maintaining this. It is a fantastic product in the tropical world, and you'll see here's what we've got with Beryl, and we're going to send this continuing to move through the Caribbean, pretty much on track with what the Hurricane Center has it as, moving the center of that circulation to the south of Jamaica, and then we get it moving across the Yucatan. Now here's where our model is taking it a little further south than what the forecast track is having, but this far out you're going to have some differences of opinion for sure, and then that track will continue to stay fairly far to the south and move into the Bay of Campeche. But what's to note is back behind that, here is another tropical system that we're expecting. I'm going to be talking about that here in just a minute, but basically the Hurricane Center right now has 3 areas of interest that it's watching. Beryl, of course, being the most important and the largest threat, but there's also Invest 94L, Beryl, and then behind closer to the African coast is Invest 96L. So again, 94 is the one that has been more or less on top of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now it's moved over into the Bay of Campeche. Beryl is our Category 4 hurricane, and 96L is even further back. Look at the last 12 hours. This storm has intensified in strength. This is not the type of system that you normally see in June, with this perfectly defined center eye wall, growing in strength, very low wind shear, and just keeping this thing a monster of a hurricane, and it will continue to do so until it runs into a few more issues that it's going to have to be dealing with. So at the moment, though, expected to stay that Category 4 strength. One more time on the official forecast track from the Hurricane Center, we've got a Category 4 hurricane, maintains that strength into Monday afternoon. Tuesday afternoon, still a major hurricane, but perhaps weakening because of some upper level winds, and then weakening to that Category 2 as it approaches closer to Jamaica, and it stays that Category 2 as it begins to make interactions with the Yucatan Peninsula over into Mexico. So that is what the plan is right now. And we'll continue to keep an eye on things. As I mentioned, if you're in the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Texas, and all along the Mexican coast, there's certainly reasons to keep an eye on this. This will show you our projected wind field. When you see the yellow here, that's representing up to 39-mile-an-hour winds. This orange shading is going to be tropical storm force winds, and then really tight in here in the center, there are some hurricane force winds that are basically underneath our icon that we see. So that will be impacting Jamaica on the current track. This blue this blue line represents that forecast cone. So we're going to keep all of that in the cone, and then continuing to move on through with that large wind field as it moves across the Yucatan Peninsula. Here is the outlook from the Hurricane Center on those invest areas. Right now, an 80% chance that we could see this area develop into a tropical system right before it gets over land. Again, it's a broad area of low pressure. It's running out of time, but it definitely could move across, get enough characteristics right before it makes its movement over land. In other words, it making a landfall, it would weaken and lose that possibility of making the tropical characters. But that has an 80% chance. And then this other tropical wave that's getting a little bit better organized is now looking, and this is Invest 96L. This is looking to have a 70% chance over the next 7 days. So that's why this shading here, this red shading, is such a long projection, because that's over 7 days that we're expecting. But even over the next 48 hours has a 40% chance of developing. So we'll really have to see. I think this system is going to end up getting a name, but will the system ahead of it, the 194 over by the Yucatan, end up? And just a quick reminder, here is where we currently have Beryl. So basically, behind Beryl, as Beryl continues to move to the west, we're going to have another system moving on through. Now, sometimes when you get one system moving right behind the other, because of the waters have been stirred up, the atmosphere has been stirred up, especially by such a large storm and powerful storm like Beryl is, this system might struggle a little bit more for its development because it's not going to be as rich of all of those things that it needs to really grow and strengthen in size and in wind speeds particularly. But the next name on the list is going to be Chris. So whether that's 94 or 96 as far as which of those areas of invest that we're to get there first, we'll have to wait and see. And maybe we're going to get two name systems out of this. We might even be using Debbie here by the end of the week as well. So we'll keep an eye on things and see how we're developing. We're expecting to use quite a few of those names on the list. All right, I'm glad you stayed all the way with me here to the end. And again, that reminder, if you search meteorologist John Dawson on YouTube, that's a great way to find a lot of my hurricane gear tests where we review items that you might want to consider for your hurricane supplies. Again, helping to get you thinking about what might apply to you and what you need in your specific circumstances as you're keeping ready for this busy hurricane season. We'll be back though every day of the week, even here on the weekends, of course, a little bit after 4 p.m. Central Time. So we'll hope to see you back here again Monday for the next update.